The old mining vessel drifted toward the massive alien station with deliberate clumsiness. Its hull bore scorch marks and dents that had been carefully applied by human engineers to suggest decades of hard use and poor maintenance. Inside the ship's cramped bridge, Ambassador David Wells adjusted his worn jumpsuit and practiced looking confused by the holographic displays that were actually far more advanced than anything the aliens possessed. "Remember, everyone, we're primitive and overwhelmed," David whispered to his crew. "Act like their technology is magic and ours barely works." The crew nodded, each one a highly trained operative who had spent months learning to appear incompetent. They had rehearsed this moment for 3 years since the first alien probe had detected Earth's deliberately weakened radio signals. The alien station loomed before them, a sprawling collection of metallic structures that the Hegemony Empire had built to intimidate new species. David knew from classified reports that human engineers could build something twice as large and 10 times more efficient, but today he needed to play the role of a backwater representative meeting advanced aliens for the first time. "Primitive. Earth vessel, prepare for docking," came the harsh voice through the communications array. The translator made the alien words sound mechanical and cold. David fumbled with the controls, making sure to look uncertain about which button to press. Yes, sir, alien sir," David replied in broken galactic standard that he had deliberately learned incorrectly. "We dock now. Please be patient with us simple humans." Behind him, Engineer Tom Bradley rolled his eyes but stayed in character. Pretending to struggle with systems that he could operate blindfolded, the docking bay doors opened to reveal 3 distinct groups of aliens waiting for them. The Hegemony representatives stood in perfect military formation, their scaled bodies covered in ceremonial armor that looked impressive but would be useless against real weapons. The Commerce Guild delegates clutched data tablets and wore expensive robes that marked them as traders and merchants. The Research Collective members hung back, their large eyes studying everything with scientific curiosity that would soon prove dangerous. David stepped off his ship with exaggerated wonder, his mouth hanging open as he stared at the alien architecture. "So big, so advanced," he muttered, playing up his amazement. "We humans never see anything like this before." The performance was flawless, and he could see the aliens relaxing as they cataloged humanity as another primitive species to be managed. An exploited General Corps of the Hegemony stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the humans. "I am General Corps, military commander of this sector. Your species will be evaluated for useful contributions to galactic civilization." His translator made his words sound like a pronouncement from on high, exactly the kind of arrogance that humanity had been counting on. "Oh yes, great general," David bowed awkwardly. "Humans very good workers, we mine rocks and fix things, we learn from wise aliens how to be better." The submission was so complete that several of the Hegemony soldiers chuckled among themselves. Merchant Prince Val from the Commerce Guild stepped forward next, his forearms gesturing as he spoke. "Your labor costs will be evaluated for efficiency. Initial reports suggest your species requires minimal life support and can work in dangerous environments. This is acceptable for low-tier assignments." The Research Collective representative, Dr. Zinn, remained silent, but David could feel those large black eyes studying every detail of human physiology. That one would be trouble later. But for now, the scientist seemed content to observe and catalog. The tour of the station was carefully choreographed humiliation. The aliens showed off their technology with the kind of condescending pride that parents might display when showing a child a new toy. David and his crew gasped and pointed at displays that were generations behind what humanity had secretly developed. They stumbled over simple concepts and asked basic questions that made the aliens feel superior and intelligent. "Your weapons technology appears limited," General Corps noted as he examined the crude projectile weapons that the humans carried. These were actually props created specifically for this mission, designed to look primitive and ineffective. "You will be assigned mining duties in hazardous asteroid fields where your expendability is acceptable." "We honor to serve great Hegemony," David replied with enthusiasm that made several aliens nod approvingly. Inside, he was memorizing every detail of their real weapons and defenses, noting weaknesses that could be exploited when the time came. The Commerce Guild was equally dismissive. "Your species will receive standard Class 7 compensation rates," Merchant Prince Vel announced. 1/10 of standard wages, with payment in basic supplies rather than currency. This is generous for a newly contacted primitive species. David nodded eagerly. Humans grateful for any payment. We simple people don't need much. The truth was that humanity's hidden economy was already more advanced than anything the galaxy had seen, but letting the aliens think they were getting cheap labor would make them careless. The meeting concluded with humanity being assigned to the most dangerous and degrading jobs in the galaxy. Mining radioactive asteroids, cleaning waste systems on alien ships, and serving as manual laborers on construction projects. The aliens were so pleased with their new source of expendable workers that they barely bothered to scan the human ship or examine their technology closely. As David's vessel departed the station, he maintained his act until they were safely out of sensor range. Only then did he allow himself a small smile. "Phase 1 complete," he announced to his crew. They bought every bit of it. Back on Earth, President Martinez received the report in a bunker hidden beneath Washington. The real human government operated from facilities that the aliens would never suspect existed. "How long do we maintain the charade?" asked General Stone, commander of humanity's actual military forces. "As long as it takes," Martinez replied. "Let them think we're weak. Let them exploit us and look down on us. Every day they underestimate humanity is another day we prepare for what's coming." She gestured to a holographic display showing deep space sensors that had detected something moving in the galactic rim, something ancient and hungry. "The real test isn't whether we can fool them now," Dr. Park added from her position at the science console. "It's whether we can stay hidden long enough to be ready when the galaxy needs us to stop pretending." In the depths of space, human ships, disguised as mining vessels, continued their real mission, mapping alien defenses and preparing for the day when Earth would reveal its true nature to a galaxy that had made the mistake of judging humanity by appearances. 23 years had passed since first contact, and the galaxy had grown comfortable with its human servants. In the asteroid belt of the Proxima system, hundreds of human workers chipped away at radioactive, or while their alien overseers watched from climate-controlled observation decks. The work was killing them slowly, exactly as the hegemony intended. Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he operated the mining laser, carving chunks of valuable minerals from the spinning rock beneath his feet. His radiation badge showed dangerous levels, but complaining would only earn him a beating from the hegemony guards. Around him, other humans worked in similar conditions, their lifespans measured in months rather than years. "Keep working, meat," growled Sergeant Vach, a hegemony soldier whose scales were decorated with scars from previous campaigns. "The Empire needs those minerals, and your kind is easily replaced." The contempt in his voice was absolute, the kind of hatred that came from years of viewing humans as livestock rather than people. Marcus nodded submissively, while his hidden earpiece crackled with a different message. "Maintain the performance," came the encrypted voice from the real human command. "Every day you suffer is another day we learn their weaknesses. Your sacrifice matters." It was small comfort when his lungs burned from inhaling metallic dust. But Marcus understood the bigger picture. The Commerce Guild had found even more creative ways to exploit humanity. On Trade Station Delta 7, human janitors cleaned waste systems that would be lethal to most species. They were paid in expired food rations and worn-out equipment. While the Guild recorded massive profits from their cheap labor, the aliens had calculated that it was more cost-effective to work humans to death and replace them than to provide proper safety equipment. Dr. Lisa Thompson worked undercover in the Research Collective's laboratories on Kepler Station, posing as a human test subject while secretly documenting their experiments. What she witnessed there made her stomach turn. Humans were subjected to painful procedures designed to test their limits, their reactions recorded with scientific detachment that treated them like laboratory animals. Subject 847 shows interesting neural responses to electrical stimulation. Noted Dr. Zinn as he increased the voltage running through electrodes attached to a human woman's skull. The subject screamed and convulsed, but the alien scientist only adjusted his instruments and made more notes. Pain tolerance appears higher than expected for such a primitive species. Lisa forced herself to remain still as needles were inserted into her spine, supposedly to study human nervous system responses. The real purpose was to map human biology for potential military applications. The research collective wanted to know exactly how to cause maximum suffering with minimum effort. Information they sold to both the Hegemony and Commerce Guild. The worst part was the children. Young humans were particularly prized for experiments, because their developing brains showed more dramatic responses to stimulation. Lisa watched helplessly as alien scientists subjected human children to tests that would leave them permanently damaged, all in the name of expanding galactic knowledge about primitive species. Meanwhile, the true human leadership met in hidden facilities that the aliens never suspected existed. President Martinez stood before a holographic display showing the extent of galactic exploitation, her face grim as she reviewed reports from operatives throughout known space. The cost of maintaining their deception was measured in human lives, and the weight of those losses pressed down on everyone in the room. The Hegemony is planning to expand mining operations to the Titan Belt, reported Admiral Foster, his weathered face showing the strain of watching his people suffer. They want to increase human worker quotas by 300%. Our people won't survive those radiation levels, even with secret medical support. General Stone paced behind the conference table, his hands clenched into fists. How much longer do we keep this up? We could end their entire civilization in a week with what we've built. Our quantum weapons could turn their homeworlds into empty space, and then what? Dr. Park interrupted from her position at the science console. We become the galactic threat, the species everyone else unites against. We've seen the deep space sensor readings. Something bigger than all of us is coming from the rim, and when it arrives, we'll need every ally we can get. The sensors had been detecting strange energy signatures for months, massive objects moving through dark space at speeds that shouldn't be possible. Initial analysis suggested they were artificial constructs, possibly ships, but their technology appeared unlike anything in current galactic databases. Whatever was coming had been asleep for a very long time, and something had woken it up. The question isn't whether we can reveal ourselves, Martinez said quietly. It's whether we'll have enough people left to matter when we do. The reports from mining colonies showed casualty rates that would normally trigger international incidents, but the galaxy viewed human deaths as acceptable losses on the hidden moon base of Luna 2. Human engineers worked on projects that would reshape galactic warfare. Dimensional fold drives that could move fleets across the galaxy in minutes. Reality manipulation weapons that could erase matter from existence itself. Consciousness transfer technology that could back up human minds before dangerous missions. All of it hidden behind holographic disguises that made the base appear to be an abandoned mining facility. Engineer Tom Bradley led a team developing quantum tunneling bombs, weapons that could phase through any known shielding and detonate inside enemy ships. The irony is beautiful, he told his assistant as they calibrated the device. They think we can barely make our ships fly, while we're building weapons that manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. The younger generation of humans was growing restless with the deception. They watched their friends and family die in alien mines while possessing the technology to conquer the galaxy. Secret meetings in hidden chambers echoed with arguments between those who wanted to maintain the facade and those who demanded immediate action. My sister died in a Commerce Guild waste processing plant, said Lieutenant Amy Rogers during one heated discussion. She choked on toxic fumes while aliens watched and placed bets on how long she'd last. How is her death strategy? Because her sacrifice and thousands like it convinced them we're harmless, replied Colonel Davis. Every human who dies maintaining our cover is a hero who's bought us time to prepare for what's really coming. When that threat arrives, her death will have meaning. The deep space sensors detected another energy spike from the galactic rim, larger than any previous reading. Whatever was approaching had noticed the galaxy's activities and was accelerating its approach. Dr. Park estimated they had perhaps 5 years before contact, maybe less. As reports continued to flow in from human operatives throughout galactic space, one pattern became clear. The aliens had grown so comfortable with their human slaves that they'd stopped paying attention to what those slaves were actually doing. Mining ships reported to alien supervisors while secretly mapping defense installations. Human janitors cleaned alien computers while copying their databases. Kitchen staff poisoned no one, but learned everything about alien biology and psychology. President Martinez closed the latest intelligence briefing and looked around the room at humanity's true leaders. The day is coming when we'll have to choose between maintaining our cover and protecting our people. When that moment arrives, the galaxy will learn what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. In the darkness beyond the galactic rim, ancient machines continued their approach, their sensors detecting the energy signatures of a thriving civilization ripe for consumption. They had no idea that among their intended prey was a species that had spent decades preparing for their arrival, a species that had learned to hide its true nature behind a mask of helplessness while building weapons that could reshape reality itself. The announcement came through official galactic channels at 14:30 Standard Time, broadcast simultaneously to every inhabited system in known space. Dr. Zinn of the Research Collective stood before the assembled Galactic Council, his large black eyes gleaming with scientific enthusiasm as he outlined what he called Project Genesis. The human species has proven surprisingly resilient to our standard research protocols, he explained to the gathered representatives. Therefore, we are implementing a new phase of study involving consciousness transfer experiments. We require 10,000 human subjects for immediate collection and transport to our primary research facility. The hegemony representative nodded approvingly. The Empire supports this scientific endeavor. Humans are a renewable resource, and their sacrifice will advance galactic knowledge. General Kor's scaled face showed no emotion as he spoke of human lives like inventory numbers. Merchant Prince Vel from the Commerce Guild performed quick calculations on his data tablet. The guild requests compensation for lost labor productivity during the collection period. These humans represent significant economic value in their current assignments. Acceptable, Dr. Zinn replied. The Research Collective will provide standard rates for replacement workers during the experimental period. The casual way they discussed human lives like commodities would have shocked anyone with a conscience, but the galactic powers had long since moved beyond viewing humans as anything more than useful animals. The collection began immediately. Human families were torn apart as hegemony soldiers dragged children from their parents' arms. The aliens showed no mercy, selecting subjects based purely on scientific criteria without regard for age or family connections. Children as young as 5 were loaded onto transport ships alongside elderly grandparents, all destined for laboratories where their minds would be dissected for alien curiosity. Amy Rogers watched through hidden cameras as soldiers dragged her nephew Tom from his mother's arms. The 8-year-old boy screamed for his mother as he was shoved into a containment cell with dozens of other terrified children. Amy's hands shook as she reached for the emergency communication device that would signal humanity's hidden forces. But her orders were clear. Maintain the deception at all costs. The transport ships filled with human cargo departed for the Research Collective's primary facility, a massive space station hidden in the Veil Nebula where their screams would never be heard. The aliens had designed the facility specifically for studying species they considered expendable, with laboratories that could accommodate thousands of subjects simultaneously. At the same moment Project Genesis launched, deep space sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim. The readings were unlike anything in galactic databases, showing propulsion systems that manipulated space-time itself and energy outputs that dwarfed entire star systems. Whatever was coming had been dormant for millions of years, and its awakening had been triggered by the galaxy's expanding civilization. Dr. Park studied the sensor data in humanity's hidden command center, her face pale as she processed the implications. "It's a swarm intelligence," she announced to the assembled leadership. "Billions of interconnected machines that consume matter and energy to replicate themselves. The energy signatures match theoretical models for self-replicating von Neumann probes, but on a scale we never imagined possible." President Martinez felt ice forming in her stomach as she reviewed the projections. "How long until they reach inhabited space?" 6 months, maybe less," Dr. Park replied. "They're accelerating as they consume dark matter in interstellar space. By the time they reach the galactic edge, they'll be moving at a significant percentage of light speed." The Galactic Council's response to the approaching threat was predictably arrogant. The hegemony began mobilizing their war fleets, confident that superior firepower would handle any threat. The Commerce Guild calculated the economic impact of a galactic war and began hoarding resources. The research collective expressed scientific interest in studying the approaching entities, viewing them as potential research subjects rather than existential threats. General Corps addressed the assembled galactic fleet commanders with typical military bravado. "Our weapons have conquered 1,000 worlds. Whatever approaches from the rim will learn the price of challenging galactic civilization." The hegemony had spent centuries believing their technology was invincible, and the approaching threat was just another opportunity to prove their superiority. The first contact with the entities occurred in the outer reaches of the Andromeda Spiral Arm. A hegemony patrol fleet encountered 3 massive constructs that appeared to be ships but moved like living creatures. The patrol commander transmitted standard challenge protocols, demanding identification and intentions. The response was immediate and devastating. The unknown entities didn't communicate. They simply began converting the hegemony ships into raw materials for their own use. Energy beams that rewrote matter at the molecular level tore through military shields like they were made of paper. Within minutes, the entire patrol fleet had been consumed and reconstituted as additional enemy units. The lone survivor, a badly damaged scout ship, transmitted final sensor readings before being destroyed. The entities weren't just destroying ships, they were learning from them. Each consumed vessel made the swarm more effective, more adaptable. The hegemony's own weapons and defenses were being turned against them, back on Earth's hidden command. Stations, humanity's true leaders watched the galactic panic with grim satisfaction. The aliens who had spent decades exploiting human labor now demanded that same labor serve as cannon fodder against an impossible threat. The official summons arrived through diplomatic channels, couched in the language of galactic duty but carrying the clear threat of punishment for refusal. All member species are required to contribute military assets to the defense of galactic civilization. Read General Corps' message. The human species will provide all available vessels for frontline deployment against the approaching threat. Ambassador David Wells received the message in his office aboard the diplomatic station, maintaining his role as humanity's bumbling representative even as the galaxy crumbled around him. "We are honored to serve," he replied in his practiced, broken galactic standard. "Humans bring all ships to help great galactic powers fight scary enemies." The cruel irony wasn't lost on humanity's leadership. The same aliens who had condemned human children to consciousness transfer experiments now expected those children's parents to die protecting alien worlds. The species that had worked humans to death in radioactive mines now demanded human sacrifice to preserve their civilization. Admiral Foster stood before the assembled human fleet commanders in a briefing room that didn't officially exist. The time for maintaining cover stories and pretending weakness was rapidly approaching its end. "They want us to be their disposable front line," he said quietly. "They expect us to die buying time for their evacuation." "The irony is perfect," observed General Stone. "They've created exactly the scenario we've been preparing for. A galactic threat that requires our intervention and a moral justification for revealing our true capabilities." President Martinez made the decision that would reshape galactic history. We maintain the deception until our people are in position. Then we show them what humanity actually is. She activated communication protocols that would reach every hidden human facility throughout the galaxy. Operation Revelation is authorized. All units prepare for transition to combat status. Across known space, human mining ships began subtle transformations. Hull plating that had hidden advanced weapon systems for decades started retracting. Engine signatures that had been deliberately suppressed began showing their true power outputs. Crews that had spent years pretending to be incompetent started revealing training that surpassed anything the galaxy possessed. The approaching entities, later designated the Void Swarm by terrified galactic researchers, continued their relentless advance. They had awakened after eons of dormancy to find a galaxy teeming with the energy and matter they needed to reproduce. Every ship, every station, every living world represented resources to be consumed and converted into more swarm units. Dr. Lisa Thompson, still undercover in the Research Collective laboratories, received coded instructions to begin evacuation protocols for human subjects. The consciousness transfer experiments were reaching their final phases, but the subjects would not be abandoned to alien scientific curiosity. Hidden rescue teams were already moving into position. As the first Void Swarm scouts entered the galaxy. Proper, consuming outlying colonies and research stations, the Galactic Council issued their final demand. All human vessels will report to Staging Area Omega-7 for immediate deployment against the approaching threat. Commanded General Corps. Any delay will be considered an act of treason against galactic civilization. The stage was set for humanity's revelation. For decades they had endured exploitation, abuse, and contempt while building weapons that could reshape reality itself. Now the galaxy that had treated them as expendable livestock would discover what happens when you underestimate a species that has been planning your protection while you plan their destruction. In the depths of space, Admiral Foster's flagship began its transformation from disguised mining vessel to humanity's most advanced warship. The hull reconfigured itself into angles that hurt to look at directly, while weapon systems that manipulated quantum probability came online. The galaxy was about to learn that their slaves had become their saviors, and the price of salvation would be measured in respect rather than lives. The transformation began in the Omega-7 staging area where hundreds of human vessels had gathered for their supposed suicide mission against the Void Swarm. What the alien observers expected to see was a collection of primitive mining ships and cargo haulers preparing for a hopeless battle. What they witnessed instead redefined their understanding of reality itself. Admiral Foster stood on the bridge of his flagship as the final masquerade ended. "All ships, drop the charade," he commanded through encrypted channels that the aliens had never suspected existed. "Let them see what we really are." The change started slowly, almost imperceptibly. Hull plating that had appeared rusted and damaged began shifting, revealing underlying structures that seemed to bend light around them. Ships that had looked like crude metal boxes started unfolding into geometric forms that hurt alien eyes to observe directly. The entire human fleet was transforming from apparent junk into vessels that appeared crafted from crystallized physics itself. Captain Lewis watched his own ship complete its metamorphosis from his command center. The mining laser arrays that had fooled aliens for decades retracted into the hull, replaced by weapons that generated controlled tears in spacetime. His navigation sensors, previously hidden behind fake displays showing primitive star charts, now revealed mapping capabilities that extended across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Sir, the aliens are trying to scan us," reported his tactical officer with barely concealed amusement. "Their sensors can't even detect what materials our hulls are made from." On the Hegemony command ship, General Corps stared at his displays in confusion that was rapidly becoming fear. "What are they doing?" he demanded of his sensor operators. "Those ships are showing energy signatures that exceed our theoretical maximums." The sensor operator's voice shook as he replied, "Sir, I'm reading power outputs that suggest they're manipulating fundamental forces." These readings should be impossible for any civilization to achieve. Dr. Zinn, aboard the research collective vessel, was frantically recording everything his instruments could detect. Fascinating, he muttered as he watched human ships phase in and out of visible space. They appeared to be utilizing quantum tunneling on a macroscopic scale. The energy requirements should collapse their entire fleet into black holes. The Commerce Guild representatives were running economic calculations that made no sense. The material costs alone should have bankrupted their entire species. Merchant Prince Vel stammered as he watched a human frigate reconfigure itself into a completely different ship design. How did they hide this level of industrial capacity? The first test of humanity's true capabilities came when Void Swarm Scouts detected the massed fleet and moved to investigate. 3 swarm units, each the size of a small moon and bristling, with weapons that had easily consumed hegemony patrol fleets, approached the staging area with predatory confidence. "Incoming hostiles," announced Captain Lewis calmly. "All ships weapons free. Show them what human engineering can accomplish." The lead human vessel, a ship that had pretended to be a garbage scow for 2 decades, fired a single shot. The weapon wasn't a beam or projectile in any conventional sense. Instead, it was a directed manipulation of quantum probability that simply made the target's existence statistically unlikely. The Void Swarm Scout didn't explode or break apart. It simply ceased to exist, erased from reality so completely that even its component atoms forgot they had ever been arranged in that configuration. The remaining swarm units attempted to adapt, their learning algorithms analyzing the attack and developing countermeasures. This had worked against every galactic weapon they had encountered, but human technology operated on principles that the swarm's creators had never imagined. The second human shot rewrote the fundamental constants of physics in a localized area, causing the swarm unit to collapse into a cascade of exotic particles that violated several conservation laws. The third swarm scout tried to retreat, but human ships had already surrounded it using faster-than-light movement that didn't rely on conventional physics. They didn't destroy this one. Instead, they captured it using containment fields that operated by convincing reality that the target was somewhere else entirely while keeping it functionally present for study. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as humanity casually defeated enemies that had terrorized the galaxy's greatest military powers. Dr. Zinn's instruments were recording energy signatures that suggested humans had learned to manipulate the same forces that governed stellar formation and galactic structure. How is this possible? General Core whispered as he watched human ships phase through solid matter while maintaining structural integrity. No species should be able to develop such technology in isolation. The answer came from an unexpected source. President Martinez's image appeared on every alien screen simultaneously. BROADCAST through communication methods that bypassed all known security protocols. She spoke in perfect galactic standard without any trace of the broken accent that humans had used for decades. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who commanded forces beyond imagination. "For 50 years, humanity has served you faithfully as miners, janitors, and laborers. We have endured your exploitation, your experiments, and your contempt while building the defenses you now witness." The image shifted to show Earth as it truly was, not the primitive world the aliens had catalogued. Cities that had appeared to be simple industrial centers unfolded into technological marvels that reached into orbit. The moon's surface split open to reveal construction facilities that dwarfed anything in galactic space. Mars, which aliens had thought was barely colonized, transformed into a fortress world whose defensive systems could sterilize entire star systems. "You believed you were managing a primitive species," Martinez continued. "In reality, you were being studied by one. Every mine you sent us to work became a research opportunity. Every alien technology you showed us was analyzed and improved upon. Every insult and abuse you subjected us to was cataloged and remembered." The revelation continued as human facilities throughout the galaxy dropped their disguises. Research stations that had appeared to be abandoned mining posts revealed themselves as advanced laboratories where human scientists had been developing technologies that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. Industrial centers that had seemed primitive unveiled manufacturing capabilities that could reshape matter at the molecular level. Dr. Kim, humanity's chief scientist, appeared alongside President Martinez to explain what the galaxy was witnessing. "We have spent 5 decades developing what we call reality engineering," she said calmly. "While you focused on building bigger weapons and faster ships, we learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of existence itself. The demonstrations that followed redefined the possible. Human ships didn't just move faster than light, they convinced space-time that they were already at their destination. Their weapons didn't destroy targets, they edited them out of reality's source code. Their defenses didn't block attacks. They made those attacks forget what they were supposed to hit." Admiral Foster addressed the alien fleet commanders directly, his image appearing on their private command channels despite every security protocol they possessed. "For decades you have treated humanity as expendable resources. You sent our children to die in your mines, subjected our people to horrific experiments, and demanded our sacrifice to protect your worlds." The aliens watched as human rescue teams materialized inside research collective laboratories using transportation methods that bypassed all known laws of physics. Human subjects who had been tortured for scientific curiosity were extracted through dimensional portals while their alien captors stood, paralyzed by weapons that froze them in temporal loops. "The consciousness transfer experiments end now," announced Dr. Thompson as she led a team of human soldiers through the research collective's primary facility. "Every human subject will be returned to Earth for proper medical care that exceeds anything your science can provide." The facilities. Alien guards tried to resist, but found their weapons simply refused to function. Human technology had reached a level where they could selectively edit the laws of physics to make enemy equipment forget how to operate while leaving friendly systems untouched. General Stone appeared on the Hegemony flagship's main screen, his image bypassing security systems that were supposedly impenetrable. "Your military exercises with human auxiliaries were extremely educational," he said with cold satisfaction. "We now know the location, strength, and tactical doctrine of every hegemony installation in the galaxy." The Commerce Guild discovered that their economic dominance was an illusion. "Your trade routes, your market manipulations, your resource monopolies," explained Ambassador Williams from a human command ship that had materialized in the heart of their financial district. "We've been observing and influencing all of it through shell companies you never suspected existed." The final revelation came as the main Void Swarm force entered the galaxy, billions of entities that had consumed entire civilizations across cosmic history. The combined galactic fleet, including every hegemony warship, Commerce Guild Defense Force, and Research Collective vessel, represented firepower that could sterilize hundreds of worlds. Against the approaching swarm, it was barely adequate to serve as an appetizer. Humanity's response was measured and precise. Admiral Foster's fleet moved to intercept the swarm using FTL methods that made them effectively omnipresent throughout the combat zone. When the battle began, it wasn't warfare in any sense the galaxy understood. It was reality revision on a cosmic scale. The Void Swarm found themselves facing weapons that didn't just destroy them, but convinced the universe that they had never existed in the first place. Their adaptive algorithms, refined across millions of years of conquest, encountered human technology that operated outside the logical framework they had been designed to understand and counter. As the last swarm units were converted into raw materials for human construction projects, President Martinez delivered her final message to the galaxy. "You have 2 choices," she said simply. "Learn to treat all species with the respect and dignity you failed to show humanity, or join the Void Swarm in non-existence." The galaxy, having witnessed the complete annihilation of a threat that their greatest powers couldn't even slow down, chose cooperation. The age of human servitude was over, and the age of human protection had begun, 6 months after the revelation. The galaxy had settled into its new reality with the uncomfortable awareness that humanity had been protecting them all along. The Void Swarm crisis had ended not with the desperate last stand everyone expected, but with methodical efficiency that made the ancient threat seem almost trivial in hindsight. Ambassador William stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers, but his role had fundamentally changed. No longer was he humanity's representative begging for scraps of respect. Now he spoke as the guardian of galactic civilization, and every word carried the weight of weapons that could rewrite reality itself. The Human Protection Accords are not negotiable, he announced to the assembled alien representatives who now sat in carefully arranged equality rather than the hierarchical dominance they had previously enjoyed. Every species receives the same rights, protections, and opportunities regardless of their technological development or military capacity. The former power brokers of galactic civilization found themselves in positions they had never imagined. General Kor, once supreme military commander of the hegemony, now served as a junior liaison officer reporting to human military advisors who had been pretending to be incompetent minors just months earlier. Your strategic recommendations have been noted, Admiral Foster told him with polite dismissal as he reviewed hegemony military doctrine. However, your understanding of modern warfare is approximately 3,000 years out of date. We'll provide updated training materials when your officers are ready for more advanced concepts. The Commerce Guild faced an even more dramatic adjustment. Their carefully constructed economic monopolies had been revealed as elaborate performances, where humanity had been pulling the strings all along. Every major trade route, resource extraction operation, and financial manipulation had been observed and influenced by human agents, operating under the cover of menial labor. Merchant Prince Vel found himself sitting across a conference table from workers he had previously dismissed as primitive labor. Your economic projections assume scarcity-based markets, explained Dr. Sarah Chun, who had spent 15 years disguised as a waste disposal technician on his primary trading station. Human technology has moved beyond resource limitations. We can synthesize any material you consider valuable, which makes your entire business model obsolete. The research collective faced the most profound humiliation. Dr. Zinn, who had subjected thousands of humans to consciousness transfer experiments, now sat in a medical facility receiving treatment for psychological trauma, induced by witnessing what real science could accomplish. Human researchers had reversed every injury his experiments had caused, healing brain damage that his primitive understanding of neurology had considered permanent. Your methodology was fundamentally flawed, Dr. Park explained as she reviewed his research notes. You were studying consciousness like it was a mechanical process rather than a quantum phenomenon. We solved consciousness transfer 40 years ago, but we also solved the ethical frameworks for using it responsibly. The children who had been subjected to alien experiments were returning to Earth, aboard ships that provided medical care beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. Human doctors used quantum healing techniques that repaired damage at the cellular level while preserving every memory and experience that made each child unique. Young Tom Rogers, who had been dragged screaming from his mother's arms for consciousness. Studies now played in advanced therapy rooms where his traumatic memories were processed by AI systems that understood human psychology better than any alien researcher ever could. His recovery was complete, but the galaxy would never forget the price of underestimating human patience and protective instincts. The Void Swarm threat had been neutralized in a manner that demonstrated the true scope of human capabilities. Rather than simply destroying the ancient entities, humanity had converted them into allies, through quantum reprogramming that preserved their intelligence while redirecting their purposes toward construction rather than consumption. Captain Lewis commanded a joint fleet that included reformed Void Swarm units now working alongside human ships to rebuild worlds that had been damaged during the initial invasion. The former destroyers of civilizations had become the most efficient construction crews in galactic history, their matter manipulation abilities now serving life rather than death. It's remarkable how quickly they adapted once we corrected their base programming. Lewis observed as he watched a former swarm destroyer reshape an asteroid into a fully functional space habitat. They were never evil, just poorly designed. Their creators programmed them for consumption because they couldn't imagine any other way to expand across the galaxy. The transformation of galactic society went deeper than political structures or military hierarchies. Humanity's revelation had shattered every assumption about technological development, social organization, and the nature of intelligence itself. Species that had considered themselves advanced were learning that they had barely begun to understand what was possible on the former hegemony homeworld. Human teachers worked with alien students to introduce concepts that their previous education had never considered. The idea that technology could be developed without exploitation, that power could exist without oppression, and that strength could serve protection rather than domination were revolutionary concepts for species raised on conquest and hierarchy. Engineer Tom Bradley, who had spent decades pretending his human-built systems barely functioned, now led workshops where alien engineers learned to think beyond the limitations that had constrained their entire civilizations. The problem with your approach, he explained to a class of former hegemony military engineers, is that you assume resources are finite and competition is inevitable. Once you realize that matter and energy are just different expressions of information, scarcity becomes a choice rather than a constraint. The research collective's facilities were being converted into genuine centers of learning where the pursuit of knowledge served ethical purposes rather than the satisfaction of curiosity regardless of cost. Human scientists worked alongside their alien counterparts to develop research methodologies that advanced understanding without causing harm. Dr. Lisa Thompson, who had endured alien experiments while secretly documenting their cruelties, now served as director of the reformed Research Institute. Science without ethics is just sophisticated barbarism, she told her mixed staff of human and alien researchers. Knowledge gained through suffering is knowledge corrupted by the methods used to obtain it. The economic transformation was equally profound. The Commerce Guild's scarcity-based markets were being replaced by abundance-focused distribution systems where human technology provided whatever any species needed without depleting resources or exploiting labor. The concept of wealth through hoarding became obsolete when anything could be synthesized from quantum foam, former mining colonies, where humans had died extracting radioactive ores, were transformed into garden worlds where any species could live in comfort and safety. The asteroids that had been human death traps became recreational spaces where families from across the galaxy could experience the wonder of space without the fear of exploitation or industrial accidents. President Martinez addressed the galaxy from Earth's revealed capital, a city that extended from the planet's surface into orbital space through architecture that treated gravity and distance as design suggestions rather than physical constraints. The age of exploitation is over, she announced. Not because we have conquered you, but because we have learned to make conquest unnecessary. The speech was broadcast through communication networks that reached every inhabited system instantly, transmitted by methods that made information truly free rather than controlled by those with the most advanced technology. Every being in the galaxy heard her words in their native language, processed by translation systems that conveyed meaning and emotion rather than just vocabulary. Humanity spent 50 years learning your languages, your cultures, your fears, and dreams, Martinez continued. We know you better than you know yourselves, not because we spied on you, but because we served you. We cleaned your ships, mined your asteroids, and listened to your casual conversations when you thought we were too primitive to understand. The revelation of humanity's true nature had created a new kind of galactic citizenship where protection and advancement were guaranteed rights rather than privileges earned through power or wealth. The strong no longer preyed upon the weak because the truly strong had revealed themselves as humanity's guardians. Admiral Foster commanded defensive networks that spanned the entire galaxy, monitoring systems that could detect and prevent exploitation before it began. Never again, he announced to his mixed-species staff, will any civilization advance by standing on the bodies of those they consider inferior. The children who had grown up under alien oppression were now attending schools where human and alien students learned together about sciences that treated ethical development as seriously as technological advancement. They were building friendships across species lines that their parents had never imagined possible. As the galaxy adapted to its new reality, deep space sensors detected other signals from beyond the galactic rim. More ancient entities were stirring, drawn by the energy signatures of human technology and the expanding waves of truly free civilization that Earth's revelation had created. But this time, the galaxy was ready. Humanity had revealed not just their weapons and technology, but their true nature as protectors who had endured decades of abuse while building the defenses their abusers would eventually need. When the next threat emerged from the cosmic darkness, it would face not just human technology, but a united galaxy that had learned the difference between strength and cruelty, between power and wisdom. The age of human pretense was over, but the age of human protection had only just begun. In the end, the galaxy had not been conquered by humanity, but saved by them, and that salvation came with a responsibility that both species would carry together into whatever challenges the universe might bring.